Some facts about AAC. There are actually more than 2 million people in the United States that are estimated to use various forms of AAC. There's not specific data on school age children, but interestingly, 12 to 30%, depends on the state, of preschool children in special education use AAC. We would expect, for several reasons, for this to be used more in those early childhood years. If someone is born with a degenerative or chromosomal genetic difference like cerebral palsy that is not curable, then we could probably expect them to start with AAC and continue on with it. But there's this large group of children who are nonverbal, and it might be related to a disability or no other disability. And often we use AAC with them to get them started with communication, but their verbal communication soon takes off if they're capable. And so it makes sense that there's going to be a higher prevalence when they're younger because there's just going to be more kids that are nonverbal that might start with some kind of communication system that move toward verbal speech. And so it should be so that there's a higher prevalence in early childhood. Federal law does mandate assistive technology, which includes AAC, that be considered in a child's planning if that's impacting their ability to access the free and appropriate public education. Federal law mandates that they're provided that. Techniques. So when we get into the different techniques, there's two main categories, unaided and aided. Think about unaided as not requiring any support. It's unaided. Aided does require external support. So an unaided technique would be sign language. They can do it completely on their own. The limitation of that is that they're probably going to have a limited number of potential communication partners. So if they have some system like manual language, like sign language or gestures with the parent that the parent understands, that's great, but will anyone else understand them? That can be a barrier. Aided actually requires external support. So maybe it's some kind of symbol board, some kind of communication book, or speech generating device. However, typically, the number of potential communication partners is greater. Think about if you were nonverbal and you went to the McDonald's. If you walked up and signed to them what you wanted, in sign language, that clerk might not know what you're asking for. If you went up with your device and pushed hamburger, even if they're not familiar, they could understand the message. And so there is place and time for both. One is not greater than the other. It's just some general, what do I want to say, pros and cons, considerations and limitations. So looking at the 4 features, this is a really important thing. This is what I was getting at in that brief introduction. The 4 features that we look at of an AAC program: the output, the selection technique, the vocabulary capacity, and the portability. We have to look at these 4 areas for each student to see what is their most appropriate AAC program. I have a couple video examples I want you to watch because it's going to go over these 2 types of main output, synthesized versus digitized in speech generating devices. So not only do we need to consider the sounds, but we have to ask how well can the student see the output display. So the overall appearance, but also then the voice output communication aid present in the communication system. So yeah, they can be speech generating, but there's 2 different types. There's synthesized and digitized. Synthesized speech is less natural sounding, but it literally just takes what you say and turns it into this digitized speech. So you can kind of have a much more novel message. The bottom one, which is, you'll hear a brief example of digitized speech, it is much easier to understand. It more closely resembles natural speech, but it's limited to what's already programmed or recorded into the device. And so you can't always have unique novel messages. So this is just one consideration, because not only do we need to think about the person using it, how they see it and hear it, but their communication partners, what their communication partners in their natural setting are going to need for that whole communication interaction to be successful. Because, yes, we need to give them this voice, but we want to make sure we're considering their environment to where they're going to be successful with it, because you want that whole communication exchange, and that is going to require a communication partner. So listen to both of these examples and then we'll move forward.